It appears Xbox is playing into this whole thing. On their Twitter page, they went ahead and made a post and said this: whoever's running the social media account needs to continue with stuff like this. They said, "We apologize in advance for the overload of great games. Play all these and more with Game Pass." So what's happening here is very interesting. Notice the way it's written. Lowercase, right? And they've basically copied the whole terminology of great games from all of the conversations. This is why you need a social media presence and somebody who has their ears to the ground. For the longest time, I could not stop hearing the word great games from so-called PlayStation fanboys trying to convince me that great games are the games that PlayStation made and they were exclusive and all that, when in reality, I'm somebody who I can tell you that some of my favorite games, none of the top three, if I would put it that way, are exclusive games. I know Elden Ring is number one, and the Arkham games or Elden Ring is number one, and number two will be the Arkham games following, themselves, which are all, third-party games. When you think about all of this, it kind of makes a whole lot of sense, but I want to go ahead and point out something else. I just remembered this. I remember a few months ago, there was a user on the channel who, when I said something, said that my take was dumb. I haven't forgotten this one because this person is an Xbox user. If it was a PlayStation fanboy, I'd say, no problem. But I want to go ahead and point this out because this particular strategy from Xbox, the flood strategy, call it what you want, Trojan horse, I call it free marketing on PlayStation, and I also call it the differential strategy. By all means, you can use that if you want, which is basically the one that makes people who are on other subscriptions feel like their subscription is trash. That's what Game Pass is trying to do. It's trying to make, it already has succeeded, and anyways, it's not trying at this point. It succeeded in making other subscription services around it look like dirt, especially its direct console rival, which would be PlayStation in this regard, that does a subscription service. It's made all PS tiers look like junk. In fact, at this point in time, it would be very funny for anybody to even open their mouths to say, oh, PlayStation Plus has something to offer over Xbox Game Pass. They used to say PS Plus has more games, therefore it's this, and I get to play these great games. But then the great games can't have this frequency and cadence, especially based on the fact that Xbox's Game Pass is one that's run with a significant amount of money. We were talking yesterday about this console fanboy that, jumped all up in here and was talking, oh, PlayStation made the most amount of money, and yabba dooba dibba dabba dabba boo. They were just blasting away at sound bites. And I asked them one question. I said, all these PlayStation games are going to come to PC because PlayStation needs money. And they said, no, PlayStation doesn't need money. They made all this money. And I said, well, what is their margin compared to what it is that they earned? And they would not say. They absolutely avoided the question and kept talking about my timeline, because I'm sure they looked it up and they were like, crap. So all of this money that PlayStation makes, its margin is around 8.9 to 9% on average. Some quarters, it's actually dipped as close to 7 as it possibly could. With this kind of a margin, PlayStation doesn't have the extra investments to do what Game Pass is doing. Game Pass, on the other hand, has built itself in a very interesting way where it has the support, the pricing, and the negotiation power that it can use to leverage games of different tiers. AAA games, brand new, which will be Xbox fed. They're not going to I don't think they're going to bother with too many AAA games that are from third-party publishers because of all the money that they need. They'd rather just put that money back into their ecosystem. And keep in mind, Game Pass and, Xbox with Phil Spencer wasn't necessarily chasing a lot of exclusivity deals right after Tomb Raider in blocking games from going to PlayStation, which is something PlayStation had already engaged in all that Xbox One generation and even into the Series generation. So that money has been going into their own studios to bring in the AAA games that their own studios are making day one to Game Pass. Then they take their coffers and go into AA negotiations, which are actually fair, and it's not as expensive compared to, say, what PlayStation would do, because they allow for those people to sell their games anywhere else. Insert Clear Obscure Expedition 33, insert Lies of P, insert Wolong, all these other games that have come from, publishers on the AA space or indie space, or even not necessarily AAA budget space, that have allowed for them to still be able to thrive while bringing their games to Game Pass. So that $1 billion or over $1 billion investment in Game Pass, I think is starting to ramp up. Instead of Xbox spending its money doing anything else or trying to make all these live service games, it already has a pipeline where it will revamp its old games, put them on PlayStation, farm dollars there, reinvest it into their ecosystem. All of this Game Pass stuff has to be funded and stay profitable in one way or the other. So what's going to happen now is there are going to be so many games for the Xbox player to actually play, they're not going to remember what's going on the PlayStation side. Even if the games are launching day one on PlayStation, they're just going to be like, oh yeah, I get it on Game Pass. And that's it. I said this before. A lot of people, I remember when there were people in the comment section complaining and saying, well, this is not fair because I don't see any PlayStation games on Xbox. And I said, see, very soon you're not going to remember this particular comment that you're making because the gaming industry is going to move past it into the why are we not getting what Xbox gamers are getting and why are PlayStation games not here and being removed from the service that we're subscribing to for, with a difference of about $2 a month. This is exactly what it is. I also see people saying that the price of Game Pass is going to go up. Bro, the price of PlayStation Plus has been going up for less. And if Game Pass goes up in price, PlayStation would also match it because they have to monetize you that are in their ecosystem. So what are you going to do about it? Is the strategy something that, you think is going to eventually hemorrhage that stranglehold that PlayStation has had on the industry? Because shiny games are shiny games until somebody makes another shiny game and then Xbox does a deal with them and then the shiny game is in Game Pass. And now everybody's like, ooh. So both for the hardcore, the traditionalist gamer, and the gamers that are actually into the game looks nice and shiny, Game Pass actually presents something for them in many categories and many tiers. To that commenter that said that my take was dumb because I said Xbox should launch more games. I said that. I actually have a video where I said Xbox needs to double down and throw more games out there. I remember getting some light pushback. Some of the Xbox fans were like, no, they need to spread it out. And one straight up called me dumb. I got to ask you, when you said that, what were you thinking? Right? Like, what were you thinking when you said that? Were you thinking that somewhere, somehow, if all those games came out, it was designed to just go ahead and devalue the platform? Or do you really think that Xbox had a multi-layered play on there? Well, number one, what is Game Pass's, challenge or any subscription challenge? A subscriptions challenge is the influx and outflow of subscribers, right? So if there's more content coming and more content dropping, the subscriber is less likely to leave their subscription because they're like, the value continues to increase at this subscription tier that I've actually engaged with, right? Then those on the outside, the differential starts to show up as well. So it made a lot of sense for them to have dropped all these games so far and possibly more and even done announcements down the road before you get to Call of Duty the next year. Because even if next year's cadence is not as strong as this year's cadence, many of us will still not have beaten the games that Game Pass dropped this year alone by next year. So there's a likelihood to keep those subscriptions in order for you to beat those games. Or maybe you win the lottery and you buy those games. Boo-hoo, Xbox is mad. And then you leave the subscription service. But by then, more would have joined the subscription service as they are continuing to talk about how the value proposition works out for them in the Xbox ecosystem. So, my take on them bringing more games to their platform, was it dumb? I don't think so. I think they basically validated that claim. I didn't need their validation. I don't need Xbox's validation. I just see the business angle of them sitting on all this IP, especially old IP, and IP that's not making money for them, and doing what with it? Even the third-party developers are starting to catch wind. One developer that caught wind of this first was Capcom, and they've proven that business model to be solid. Watch more of this happen. Thanks for watching the video. Appreciate you all so much. Peace out.